Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Chuggu Podcast. My name is Thomas Durning, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Pearse McLaughlin. Hello, Pearse.
Hola.
How you doing? On today's podcast, we'll be reacting to last weekend's English Premier League and Scottish Premier League results. We'll be giving our reaction to the end of the January transfer window. We'll also be reacting to this year's Champions League group stage. And at the end of the podcast, Pearse will be giving a rundown of all the latest Asian football news. So we'll start off, as always, with the English Premier League. So I'll just quickly go through the results. So on Saturday, the 2nd of February, on Saturday, the 1st of February, the results finished Nottingham Forest 7, Brighton 0, Everton 4, Leicester 0, Ipswich 1, Southampton 2, Newcastle 1, Fulham 2, Bournemouth 0, Liverpool 2, and Wolves 2, Aston Villa 0. And then on Sunday, the 2nd of February, the results finished Brentford 0, Tottenham 2, Man United 0, Crystal Palace 2, Arsenal 5, Man City 1. And then yesterday, which was Monday, the 3rd of February, there was one match which finished Chelsea 2, West Ham United 1. So, Pearse, as always, which match stands out to you the most?
There's a few matches you could choose from, but the one I'm going to go for is Nottingham Forest 7, Brighton 0. I don't think many teams do that to Brighton, and it's not long. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Nottingham Forest getting beat 5-0 by Bournemouth. And Brighton beat Bournemouth recently, and Nottingham Forest knocked 7 past them. So it's a mad league in the Premier League. There's goals galore, and I think if you score 7 goals without a reply in a game after also losing 5-0 recently, that shows brilliant character and resilience and bounce back ability that they've had, and they've had a great season. And maybe that Bournemouth result was a blip in the road that they needed. A little reality check that was going too swimmingly. They're comfortably third in the league. And we've got to talk about our front two. I know defensively they're superb as well, but I thought, especially Anthony Elanga, I think his pace and his directness and his unselfishness up front was really, really effective, and Brighton couldn't handle him. And then obviously big Chris Wood just does what he does best, in the right place at the right time, scores his 3 goals, and which I think the form of him is unbelievable this season. He's got, I think, 17 Premier League goals in 24 matches for a 33-year-old Chris Wood. I think that's incredible. And he's not long off the back of signing a new 2-year deal as well. So I think that, and then obviously you look at someone like Anthony Lang, I think Manchester United will have a massive regret in letting him go, because I think he could have offered them a lot in the side that they've got now that are really poor. And yeah, no, just Nottingham Forest is strengthening their European push and potential Champions League football next season, and they're just going from strength to strength. And I thought that was the standout result. I thought they were dominant defensively and offensively, and I thought the two main men were Alanga and Chris Wood.
Just obviously just touching on that game, there was a lot after that game. There was a lot of kind of, not criticism, but the Brighton manager was getting accused of being a bit, he was too kind of cocky, as you would say, because apparently, I saw some of the analysis after the game, and the way the Brighton was set up was they were sort of disrespecting Nottingham Forest. Like, they were so open in the midfield, Brighton. They only had like one sitting midfielder, who was Hinshelwood, who's a 18-year-old kid. I think the Brighton manager just kind of thought that he would go to Nottingham Forest and they would just play the exact way they always want to play, and think that they'll get a result. And obviously, it's totally backfired on them. They conceded 7 goals, and a lot of people were saying after that the Brighton manager, because we all know how young he is, that he was kind of taught a big lesson there. Because if you go to Nottingham Forest this season, especially at home, you're going to have to change the way you play, because they're just so. I don't think any team in the league now this season can go to Nottingham Forest and just play the way they want to play, and they'll win the match, because Nottingham Forest just have too good a team. You're just going to have to you're going to have to sacrifice some areas of the way you want to play. So I just want to touch on that, the fact that the Brighton manager was getting accused of being a bit too disrespectful in terms of the way he set up his Brighton team. Because when you see some of the goals they were so open. And 7-0, it's a bad one for them. But yeah, no, that's your standout match. That was going to be my standout match, but I have to make it Arsenal 5, Man City 1. I didn't expect. I had a feeling that Arsenal would win that match, but I didn't expect them to win 5-1. Arsenal obviously started very well in the match. They got their goal very early, a poor Man City mistake. And then after Arsenal got that first goal, I thought Man City played pretty well. Arsenal could have scored again. Kai Havertz could have made it 2-0, but it was a bad miss. But I thought Man City were in good control going into half time, and then they come in the second half, they get the goal to make it 1 each through Haaland, and then I thought after that Man City were just going to go on and probably win the match. But after Man City scored to make it 1 each, they just collapsed totally. The last half an hour of that match, Arsenal just ran away with it, scored 4 brilliant goals. I mean, the goal to make it 2-1 was a deflection. It was really unlucky. But the way Man City played after they got back into the match, I was stunned. I couldn't believe they were just so slow. They sort of just gave up. And you don't see Pep Guardiola's teams getting beat 5-1 very often. And the fact it was against Arsenal as well, that's going to hurt them big time. On the day for Arsenal, they were really good. A couple of players I have to mention for Arsenal, the 2 academy players, Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. He looks like, I don't know if you've seen him, Pearse, but he looks like a top player. He's going to be, 18-year-old. It's high praise, but he sort of does remind me of Ashley Cole a wee bit. He's only 18, but he looks so strong. He's so fearless. He did score in the match. I think he made it 5-1. He made it 4-1, sorry. And his celebration, I didn't really agree with. I don't know if you saw it, but he kind of imitated Haaland's celebration. Yeah, I didn't really like that. A bit disrespectful, in my opinion. And I think he was just getting carried away with the game and with the emotion of the game. So I didn't really like that. And then obviously Ethan Nwaneri, who again, he looks like a top player as well. He scored in the Champions League this week, and then he scored against Man City. 2 brilliant goals he scored this week. So Arsenal look like they've got two young prospects on their hands that are going to have a really good future for them. And as I just said about Man City, very poor. I can't believe. It's gone. Everybody thought that, the fact that they had no Rodri this season, it was going to make it harder for them. But this goes way past Rodri for me. I can't believe the drop off they've had. Their midfield, especially, just looks so weak. Kevin De Bruyne he didn't play in this match. He played the last 20 minutes, but he's just not the same player anymore. The likes of Gundogan has lost his legs. They're struggling going forward. They're struggling. They've also got Haaland, but he doesn't really do a lot in the match. So they've got a lot of issues there. Man City, in the summer coming up, I think they're going to have a lot. They're going to have to make a lot of big changes to that squad, because it does look like an end of an era with that team. But I wanted to touch on that match. Arsenal 5, Man City 1. That is my standout match from the weekend. There is a few matches there. Man United and Old Trafford. I don't think it's a surprise anymore. And then obviously Everton won 4-0. David Moyes has come back into Everton, and that's 3 wins in a row now they've had. So he's definitely got them going. But yeah, my standout match from the weekend in the English Premier League: Arsenal 5, Man City 1. So just sticking on the English Premier League, I touched on at the start, the January transfer window has now finished. That also means in the English Premier League, the January transfer window is finished as well. I don't know about you, Pearse. I thought it was quite a quiet window in the Premier League. The biggest spenders were Man City, who made quite a few signings. What was your thoughts on the English Premier League transfer window this January?
Quite underwhelming, I think. I don't think many clubs spent big, like you say. I think it was Man City because more of a necessity. And I think obviously the biggest signing for me in terms of name profile, and I think will come very good, is Marmoush for Manchester City. I think he was the big one that they needed. Someone to come and replace. You mentioned it in a previous podcast that filling that void that Julian Alvarez left when he went to Atletico Madrid. And I think he will cover a variety of positions, whether it be anywhere along the front line or even just being the striker. And I think he'll score a lot of goals. Obviously not scored his first two matches, but he's just getting adjusted to the league and he was flying in the Bundesliga. So I think that was for me the biggest deal, and I think that will be a massive sign. I think it'll be brilliant for Manchester City that way. But I thought a lot of the clubs have been kind of savvy with their deals, where it would just be like loans or cut price deals or pre-contracts or just not wanting to break FFP. So yeah, no. So I think it's been quite an underwhelming one. It's been a quiet one. I think we were obviously expecting a flurry of deals to happen across the board, but it wasn't to be. And I think the days of spending 500, 600 million in an English transfer January window is long gone. I think clubs need to try rein in a little bit and spend within their means.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It wasn't the most. It won't be the most memorable January transfer window in the English Premier League. Obviously, Man City were the big spenders. Obviously you touched on there Marmoush, who looks like it's going to be a good player for them. They signed Kusanov. They signed a Brazilian player, and also on the last day of the window yesterday, they signed Nico Gonzalez from Porto for 50 million. So that was their January transfer window. Obviously, in terms of outgoings, Kyle Walker was probably the biggest name who left for AC Milan on loan. So probably Man City were the biggest standouts in the English Premier League January window this month. But I just wanted to touch on the likes of Aston Villa. I actually think they had a good window. They on loan from Man United, they signed Marcus Rashford. They got Axel Disasi and Marco Asensio on deadline day. So I think they've actually had a good window. They also signed Daniel Malin this window as well, from Dortmund. So they look they've added quite a lot of definitely attacking players this window. They sold John Duran to Al Nassr, which I don't know about you, Pearse, but I was a bit disappointed with that one. Because John Duran, the thought of him going to Saudi Arabia, he's only 21. But there is good things you can look at it as well. He's going to play with Cristiano Ronaldo, Al Nassr, so he'll learn a lot from him. Also, the money he's going to get is probably it's going to be life changing for him. But I was a wee bit disappointed with that. I really thought he was going to stay in Europe at least, but he went to Saudi. And also Arsenal put in a bid for Ollie Watkins, which Aston Villa rejected. So you would probably say that when I think about it more, actually, you maybe think that Aston Villa have probably been the busiest this January window. They've added a lot of players and quite a notable players left. So they have probably been a little bit busier. But yeah, apart from that, and then the teams that haven't been busy, I was surprised at Man United that they didn't really sign anyone, to be fair. They signed the left back Patrick Dorgu from Lecce in the Serie A. He's a left back, which I think they needed. They obviously Anthony left on loan to Real Betis, but I was expecting more from Man United, to be fair. and it didn't transpire. So I think Ruben Amorim's going to be a little bit disappointed there. And then just finally, I just want to touch on Tottenham. They signed Bayern Munich striker Matis Tel from Bayern Munich. They signed him on loan with an option to buy. So that looks like that could be a good signing because he is quite a promising player. So yeah, but just overall, a very quiet window in the Premier League. Not many standouts, but obviously in the summer, that's when it is the busiest. And I think when it gets to summer, we'll have a lot more to talk about in terms of the transfer window in the English Premier League. So we'll now move on to the results from last weekend's Scottish Premier League. So I'll just quickly run through them. So on Saturday, the 1st of February, the results finished Dundee 0, Hearts 6, Hibs 2, Aberdeen 0, St Mirren 0, St Johnstone 1, Kilmarnock 1, Dundee United 0. And then on Sunday, the 2nd of February, there was two matches which finished Motherwell 1, Celtic 3, and Rangers 4, Ross County 0. So Pearse, which match stands out to you the most?
St Mirren 0, St Johnstone 1. Not kidding on.
No, that's quite a big result, but for St
Oh,
Johnstone.
that massive result for St Johnstone. Obviously giving themselves a fighting chance. They're clawing points back when they look dead and buried. So no, massive credit to them because I think the last couple of weeks they've
That's a
been
big result for them. You did that.
slowly but surely actually picking up results. So in terms of safety in the Premiership, it goes a long way and it narrows that gap now to 5 points, obviously on Ross County. So they love to fight another day. But in terms of, I think the big result for me, it's not the highest scoring game, obviously. But I'm going to go with Hibs 2, Aberdeen 0.
Yep.
And I just think Aberdeen, it's just a sorry state of affairs because the last time Aberdeen won a league game, they were second. They had 23 points, they had 21 goals, and a game in hand, better off than Hibs at that point, who were bottom of the league. And now 12 weeks later, there's only one place between them, 2 points separating them, and a 27 goal swing. So for me, Aberdeen are in free fall. They've 14 games without a win. And I don't know if you've seen Jimmy Thelin and his players going over to applaud the fans at the end of the game, but it's turning toxic. The fans are not happy. Fans are not happy at all. And I don't know any manager in the history of football that has survived this poor run of results. I'm not calling for him to get sacked, but he's been heavily backed in the summer and in January. But he needs to do something. He needs to change his way. He needs to change the tactics. He needs to get confidence back in that team because they're in free fall and they just don't look good at all at the moment, Tom. In terms of defensively, they're a shambles. Like needless mistakes. It's like boys school stuff. And then obviously up top, the goals are dried up. You Kevin Nisbet, he had a couple of chances at the weekend as well, fluffed his lines. You Papa Guy just back for injury, he still needs to get up to speed. But in terms of Aberdeen, it doesn't look good. I think like we mentioned before, the terrific start they had to the season, they get quite lucky in a few of the games scoring late goals. Mashed over the cracks a little bit, but you couldn't deny that the results and the performances he had in terms of against the Old Firm as well. And I think that's kind of saved his job at the moment. But I think if they drop out the top six, I think his job and his tenure could be over. Because these terrible results cannot continue. And Aberdeen's a massive football club. And I remember not too long ago they were calling for Derek McInnes' head, considering he was guaranteed them second, third, going to cup finals, cup semi-finals on a regular basis. So so I think Aberdeen really need to pick up results, and I think we've got to flip it the other way as well. I think Hibs have been a terrific running form. And I think they're a joy to watch. I think, like we mentioned, David Gray, I think, was the Edinburgh Derby not so long ago. Hearts and Hibs bottom of the table. We touched on it in the podcast. That it was like make or break for either manager. And David Gray's turned it around. They've stuck with him. Club legend of Hibernian, and he's got them playing some really, really good football, and they thoroughly deserve to be where they are. And I think shoring up the defence and getting the best out of Martin Boyle again. And obviously the Cadden brothers have been pretty reliable in terms of goals, assists, and providing good deliveries from the wide areas. And I think introduction of Dwight Gale as well. I know he's an experienced ex-Premier League player, but I think that experience that is needed. He may not score every game, but he brings that calmness to the team, and he gives them a different outlet up front. And I just think yeah, Hibs are going to a really nice place at the moment. I think Hibs have got a big chance to finish the top four this year. And I think if you said that at Christmas, yeah, we'd be laughing because of how poor they were, them and Hearts. But I think because this league is so tight from I think third down to 10th is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's Thelin, isn't it?
So I think this league outside the top two is going to get right down to the wire, and it's an exciting league this season. And I'm really looking forward to more twists and turns as we go into the tail end of the season. But no, I thought that was my standout fixture in terms of result.
Yep. I'm going to have to go with a high scoring one. It has to be. It has to be mentioned. Because not every week hardly any week do you see 6 goals getting scored in a single game in the Scottish Premier League. And the fact that Hearts went to Dundee away from home and done that is mightily impressive. In terms of Hearts, we're starting them. As you said, all these stats about where they were and where they are now, it's night and day. Because start of the season, we also talked about it, that they were terrible. They just could not get going. Bottom of the table, couldn't buy a win. And now all of a sudden, Neil Critchley, who actually had a tough start when he did get appointed, but he seems to be now slowly turning it around. I'm going to I can't remember his name, but they signed a striker this January window, Kabangu, that's his name. And he scored a couple at the weekend, and he looks quite a good player. He's going to be quite a good player for them. It was him and Shankland up front at the weekend, and they caused Dundee all sorts of problems. Shankland with the holding up the play, and Kabangu, who had that really good, quite scary pace. He looks really strong, really fast, and he could go both fields very well. So he looks like he's a good player for them up till the end of the season. But yeah, I mean Hearts. I mean they're right up there now. I think they're now going to be now. I mean, it's so funny how this league goes. I mean, a few weeks ago they were worrying about can they get out of this relegation form. Now all of a sudden they're now, in my opinion, they're probably thinking, right, can we now finish third? I mean, it's just crazy how this league goes. I mean, the fact that you can just go on this little run, and then all of a sudden you go from thinking about one thing to then totally thinking about a totally different thing in this league. So it's quite crazy how it goes. But what a win for Hearts. And yeah, I think it does look like now that they've turned a corner and they're going to have a really good end to the season. Whereas Dundee, you don't expect that to happen under a Tony Docherty team. Dundee have been really good the last couple of years. We've talked about them specifically on this podcast about how impressive they have been in the league. And the fact that they lost 6-0, I was really surprised at that. I didn't expect that at all. So that's one that they'll be really disappointed with. But if I'm Dundee, I wouldn't. If I'm a Dundee fan, I wouldn't get too worried. Because they have got a lot of credit in the bank, this team. And I'm sure that was just a bad day at the office, and they'll probably turn it around very next week. They'll probably get a reaction out of the team and get back to sort of normal ways. So that was my standout match. I have to touch on briefly, just quickly, on the Celtic match. Obviously, Celtic won 3-1. And obviously Jota scored. Which was his first game back, his second debut, and he looked quite emotional at the end. And he's now number 7 for Celtic. And I think this time he had a great first spell at Celtic, and I just have a feeling that this second spell, he's just going to have a good time, because he just seems to fit Celtic so well. Every time he plays for Celtic, it just seems to bring the best out of him. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that. Just before we move on, Pearse, I just there was a bit of news come out in terms of managerial news from the Scottish Premier League last week. So it was announced last weekend, not last weekend, the weekend before. Stuart Kettlewell had resigned as Motherwell manager. It was quite a surprise, but apparently a lot of it was to do with the abuse that his family have been getting over recent results, and he just felt he'd had enough, and he subsequently resigned. So I just want to hear your quick thoughts on that, Pearse.
Yeah, I think it's uncalled for. I think if you're threatening someone's family because of the job they're doing, it's just, especially, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And I think that Stuart Kettlewell was one of the most honest managers in the league. He just says it as he sees it. And I think he's built a brilliant squad at Motherwell, considering he's working with buttons. And the fact is, the way he's developed young players, especially someone like Lennon Miller and other young players that came through the academy. And even when you look at his squad as well, he's got a lot of injuries at the moment. So the fact is that the circumstances he's surrounding, and the fact is he's had some poor runs and he's had some terrific runs, but he's got them sitting comfortably in the table, in the top six. So I just don't get the Motherwell fans' opinion or attitude towards the manager. 'Cause I think he's done a terrific job, and I'm sure he'll get another, he'll get another job soon, whether it be in the top flight of Scotland or down in England somewhere. I think he's a really good manager, and I think he's shown at his time that he can develop young players as well. So I think he'll no doubt get another top job, and I think he's a top man. And hopefully it doesn't affect him too much, and he spends some quality time with his family now that he's resigned. But you don't want to see any manager lose a job or quit their job due to these circumstances. I think that's some selection of the supporters need to be called out, and they need to be held accountable for their actions, because I think that's out of order.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a big shame because I actually thought I thought he'd done a really good job and was doing a good job at Motherwell. As you said, sitting comfortably in the table, brought some good players through, the likes of Lennon Miller, who's going to go on to have a really good career. And the fact that he had to resign because of that, I thought was really disappointing. I always had a lot. I always liked him because I always thought in his interviews as well after the game, I always thought he was really good to listen to because, as you said, he was really honest. He kind of just said it as it was. He didn't kind of fluff his lines. And I thought it was quite refreshing as well. He was always really good to listen to after the match. So quite disappointed on that front. And actually, every time when he played Celtic or Rangers, I actually always felt that Motherwell gave a good account of themselves. They were never really, you know, comfortably beaten. I always thought they gave both these teams a really good game. They got to the semi-final of the League Cup this season. Just narrowly got beat off the Rangers. So just overall, I thought it was really disappointing to see that he had resigned. But I obviously understand the reasons for it. It's not good to see that. You don't want to see that. That he's about the fact that the abuse was too much for him and he had to kind of take himself out of that limelight. But yeah, really disappointing to see. And it'll be interesting to see who Motherwell appoint next. And when that does happen, we'll also talk about it on the podcast. So just now, we'll move on now to obviously in the Scottish Premier League, the transfer window has finished. Quite a mixed bag of transfer. I actually don't think for the first time that Celtic Rangers have been the busiest in a January window. I actually think another team has been busier, which you mentioned, and that was Aberdeen. They signed a lot of players this January window. As you said, Jimmy Thelin was heavily backed. And it's now for him to deliver and get Aberdeen back to some sort of form because, as you said, they are on a terrible run of form. I've talked about it a lot the last few weeks. 14 games without a win. And the first time this weekend, he actually did seem, the first time I've noticed he was getting frustrated. And he has been backed, so he's got to deliver now. But just sticking on Aberdeen, they did lose yesterday. Duke, he left Aberdeen yesterday. He's now moved to Leganés in Spain. He's been quite up and down. He had a great first season for Aberdeen, and then he sort of fell off, and then he stopped playing for Aberdeen, didn't want to play for them. But then, to be fair to him, he did come back, and he kind of did give a good account of himself at the end of his career at Aberdeen. So he was quite a big loss for Aberdeen. But yeah, Aberdeen for me were the busiest this window. What about you, Pearse? What was your thoughts on the transfer window in Scotland?
I think, like you say, I think similar to the English Premier League, I think a lot of clubs are not wanting to lose their star players, and they're wanting to do cut price deals or even, like you say, pre-contracts for the summer. And I think probably the biggest one for me in terms of pre-contract was probably the one that happened last night. That's Lyle Cameron to Rangers.
Yep.
And I think he's a young talent in Scotland. I've watched him last year when he promoted with him, and this season, I think he's a very good player that can play in the middle of the park. He's a goal threat, and I think he's at that profile that he's 22 years of age, and he's SPFL proven. And I think both sides of him need to start doing that more in terms of bringing more through Scottish talent. And I think the best Scottish talent should always play for Celtic and Rangers if they possibly can, because you need that Scottish core of any squad in terms of European football as well, and obviously to develop the national team, along with obviously players from abroad. So I think and the fact you're getting them for obviously free, and then obviously whatever compensation you have to pay in the summer. But I think that's a pretty smart business by Rangers. And then obviously I think the big one, like you mentioned, Jota, I think that's a massive deal in terms of signing. We touched on it last week, but I think that's probably the biggest marquee signing of the window. But no, I think in terms of like you mentioned, Aberdeen were the busiest, and I think now it's just down to Jimmy Thelin to get these players hitting the ground running, because they need to get some sort of form again. But a lot of these players are not from Scotland, so they need to bed in very quickly. And it's very, very quiet window both in England and Scotland. So no, but that's my overall thoughts on the transfer window.
So we'll now move on to discussing the conclusion of the Champions League. So I'll just quickly run through the table. So everyone so all the clubs who automatically made it through and are now in the last 16 of the Champions League. So there was 8 teams that done that, and they include Liverpool, Barcelona, Arsenal, Inter Milan, Atletico Madrid, Bayer Leverkusen, Lille, and Aston Villa. That was the order from 1st to 8th. So all the teams that made it in the playoff. So 9th, Atalanta, 10th, Borussia Dortmund, 11th, Real Madrid, 12th, Bayern Munich, 13th, AC Milan, 14th, PSV, 15th, PSG, 16th, Benfica, 17th, Monaco, 18th, Brest, 19th, Feyenoord, 20th, Juventus, 21st, Celtic, 22nd, Man City, 23rd, Sporting Lisbon, and 24th, Club Brugge. These were all the teams that made it in the playoffs, and the teams that were knocked out fully. They were Dinamo Zagreb, who were 25th, 26th, Stuttgart, 27th, Shakhtar Donetsk, 28th, Bologna, 29th, Belgrade, 30th, Stuttgart, 31st, Sparta Prague, 32nd, RB Leipzig, 33rd, Girona, 34th, RB Salzburg, 35th, Slovan Bratislava, and 36th, Young Boys. So that's the concluded Champions League table. So this was the first time the new format in this year's Champions League. So I just want to ask you, Pearse, first of all, what did you like? What did you like this new format this year? Did you not like it? What was your thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I liked it. It's like every match is like a cup final. It's like a jeopardy. We're playing obviously 7 different sides rather than the old format of 6 games where you play 3 sides home and away. And obviously ride mostly on your home form to progress you. And I think this time it was good because you get two teams from each pot, pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, or whatever pot you're in, you then get the same one team from that pot and then 2 from the lowest pot or whatever. So I think in terms of that aspect, you get to experience, especially for fans, it's fantastic. You get to experience different cities, maybe teams that you never played before. You expand it a little bit, 2 extra games, some extra revenue for the clubs as well. And I think, as you've seen, you look at somebody like Manchester City and Real Madrid, they struggled. Um, they really struggled for the holders and the big spenders of Man City. Literally just scraping it in the last game. So it just shows you even the biggest of clubs struggled, and it gives teams a chance that you never thought was possible to progress straight into the last 16. And yeah, no, I thought it was really exciting. Yeah, and like you say, there's so many big clubs. Look at the playoffs, look at the clubs that are in there. For example, Dortmund, Madrid, Bayern Munich, AC Milan, PSG, Benfica, Juventus, Man City, as well as obviously Celtic managed to get in there as well. But I think it just shows you the calibre of teams this year that haven't had it their own way. So it just shows you that for me as a neutral, it's more exciting because you don't want the big teams to be facing each other all the time. You don't want the smaller teams to get beat 3, 4, 5, 6-0. So I think it gives everybody a chance, and I think it's better as a spectacle because it gives underdogs a massive opportunity to progress and make a name for themselves.
Yep, I agree. I was skeptical about it at the start. I wasn't sure about it, but now we're at the end of it. I actually did enjoy it. The thing I enjoyed about it the most was the fact that I thought it was refreshing that each team in the Champions League had to play a different team each week. So like it wasn't like the traditional like you're in a group stage with 4 teams, you play everyone once at home, then you play them all again away. This time it was different. You played each team differently, a different team every Champions League week, which I actually thought was really refreshing, because teams were going up against different styles. You weren't getting used to one set of team. Um, so I, I thought that was good. And as you said, there was more on the line because like say like the traditional form, like they would kind of make sure they would win these matches and then possibly put out a weaker team in a in another in another match in the traditional 4 team league because they knew that if they picked up the certain points against these teams, they'd be fine. Whereas in this format, it wasn't like that. I think every week in terms of you have to win because um there was more at stake. And then it's actually done. See the teams that don't have that much of a chance in Champions League. It's actually the underdog, so to speak. It's actually done them a big favour as well because you look at like the teams that are in the playoff, as you just mentioned. You know, for example, Aston Villa and Lille, they're now automatically through to the last 16 Champions League, and they're having to play less games than Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, for example, who are now in the playoff. So, like for teams like them, it's fantastic. It really is. In terms of the teams that got knocked out, there wasn't that much of a surprise. The teams that got knocked out, apart from one, which was the obvious, which was RB Leipzig. I was quite surprised at that. But the rest, I wasn't really that surprised about. But obviously, Man City got lucky, because they went right to the last day. They were 1-0 down at half time. They were basically knocked out at half time, but they managed to claw back. But overall, I thought it was really good. I actually did enjoy it. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was probably little tweaks along the way. In this Champions League format, it'll be interesting to see what that is. But first year, really enjoyed it. Just sticking on Champions League, obviously, 2 Scottish people, we have to talk about the Scottish team that was in the Champions League, and that was Celtic. So now that it's finished, Pearse, 8 matches for Celtic. How do you think they got on?
I thought they done superb. I thought they competed well. Apart from obviously the game against Dortmund where they get scalped and taught a harsh lesson that you can't be as open as that away from home. And I don't think Dortmund this season have been up and down in the Bundesliga. But I remember watching that night, like everything they hit just went in. They were just so clinical. It was just one of those days. It was like it wasn't a 7-1 game, because I don't think there's much between the two sides at the beginning of the game, and then obviously the game opens up a bit and gets a bit away from themselves, and then obviously Celtic then backed up with a terrific 0-0 away from home against Atalanta, who have been pretty good in the Champions League and domestically in Serie A, and they've put a lot of goals past a lot of teams, and they created a lot of chance that night. And I thought the defence that they had, and obviously Schmeichel was superb and get some big results, like you say, Leipzig at home. And I think they gave a good account of themselves against Aston Villa in the last match day. Although they already qualified, I thought being 2-0 down after 5 minutes, you kind of thought, is this Dortmund again? And then they managed to get 2 quick goals themselves, and then they're going for the win. And then be caught in the counter. And you look at Aston Villa, the squad that they have, it's really, really strong, and it's one of the best assembled squads, I think, in the Premier League. And they've got a world-class manager, in my opinion, in Unai Emery. And you just have to look at some of the players they've signed in January that they've just strengthened again. They've gotten to the top 8. And I think we all know Unai Emery's pedigree in terms of Europe, in terms of Europa League. How many times he won it? He's won it on 5 separate occasions. So it just goes to show you, I think, to compete against a side away from home in the Premier League, I think it shows volumes. And then obviously, I just think Celtic qualifying for the knockout stages of any Champions League competitions is a massive achievement, considering the recent years it hasn't been good enough in terms of getting some terrible results, and obviously not qualifying and not giving a good account of themselves. But they've had maybe some good performances under Ange, Postecoglou, and then obviously Brendan Rodgers last season. But I think just get over that hurdle, just make sure they qualify for the next phase out of the groups, and then see what it takes them. But obviously, we'll probably touch on it in a wee bit. But they've got a really glamorous tie coming up as well, so that a lot of Celtic fans will be looking forward to.
Yep. Celtic overall, I thought, as you said, I thought they did really well. The first game they did really well, and then after the Borussia Dortmund game where they got hammered 7-1, I think me and you both thought that, oh, here we go. I don't think Celtic will. I think this could derail their whole campaign, and at that point, I was sort of thinking the worst of Celtic, but they actually managed to claw it back really well from that. They reacted really well. The biggest thing for me is I was impressed with the lack of goals that they conceded after that Dortmund game. The fact they went to Atlanta, they drew 0-0 away from home. They went to Dinamo Zagreb, they drew 0-0 away from home. Really impressive. They picked up on a really impressive result against Leipzig at home. So I actually thought overall they were really solid, bar that one game against Borussia Dortmund. On the last game of this campaign, they played Aston Villa away. Celtic had already kind of sewn up there. They knew where they were going, playoff. And they gave a good account of themselves. It was the worst possible start for them, 2-0 down. But they managed to claw their way back in the game. Then Aston Villa did get them 2 goals. Aston Villa did deserve to win that on that day, in my opinion. But Celtic, to be fair, they've got the job done. And on that day, they were missing a few key players, the likes of Carter Vickers, Maeda, and Kyogo, who'd been sold. So overall, for Celtic in this Champions League campaign, thought it was really good. Thought it was really strong from them, and I think they're one of the teams the most to have benefited from this campaign. And then just before we move on, we have to touch on the fact that Celtic will be playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League playoff. What do you think about that, Pearse?
I think the option between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, I think if I had to choose between the two sides, I'd have probably chose Bayern Munich. But they're 2 world-class sides and 2 favourites to win the competition before it even starts. But I just think facing an Mbappe, a Vinicius Junior, a Rodrigo, it just sounds more frightening because that electrifying pace. But I think Bayern
Yeah.
Munich are still very dangerous, and I think you can get at them. You can get at them a bit more defensively. But obviously you've got someone like Harry Kane who's frightening. You've got Musiala, you've got Leroy Sané. So they have got some really dangerous players. But I think if you had to choose the worst of the two sides, and obviously Real Madrid are the holders, and Celtic played Real Madrid not so long ago, and I think it's just another side. And if we probably remember from the first spell under Rodgers' tenure that they played Bayern Munich at home and gave a really good count of themselves. Where Callum McGregor scored against Bayern Munich, and I thought that was a really good tie at that time. So I think they can at home. The fact it's the first leg's at home, I think it gives Celtic a chance. But like we mentioned in the window, they've only got one fit striker. So I think if Adam Ida gets an injury, it could be massive. And obviously, we all know the suspension from Maeda. He's going to be missing the first leg. His red card against Young Boys had been upgraded to a 2-match ban, so now he's going to miss the first leg, but he'll be vital for the second leg. But Celtic will have Jota available, so that they've got themselves a chance. I think Celtic need to get a positive result. They need to get a win against Bayern Munich somehow. And Bayern Munich haven't. Bayern Munich have had some big defeats in the Champions League this season, especially from the last game. They lost to, I think it was Feyenoord. I think it was Feyenoord. Yeah. And they also lost to Aston Villa quite comfortably as well. So there's an opportunity there. Celtic need to go and take it, but it's going to be a really tough task, and Celtic will need to be at it 100%. The fans will need to be behind them. I think it'll be an electrifying experience, and I think it will be a tie I'll be really looking forward to. And it's not that long away. It's only it's 13th of February, so it's going to be an exciting night. And I think Celtic have got themselves a massive chance. They need to get a win in the first leg to stand a chance to progress. But I think even just playing against this calibre opposition and then getting to a stage is an achievement on its own, regardless of what happens. But I'm really looking forward to tying. It's whetting my appetite for more.
Yeah, it's a really exciting one. When I found out it was either going to be Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, um, I thought I was feeling the worst. Obviously, Bayern Munich is the better tie, so to speak, even though that's going to be as difficult as it can be. Two top quality sides in Europe, two of the best teams in the world. But if you were looking at who Celtic probably have a better chance against, as you said, it would be Bayern Munich in my opinion. But to have a tie like Bayern Munich, it's credit and it's deserved for all the work that Celtic have done in this Champions League group stage. And let's be fair, let's be honest, Celtic don't have anything to lose getting into these two ties. Against Bayern Munich, it's going to be Bayern Munich under all the pressure because they're expected to win. Whereas Celtic, they don't have that pressure really. So that might work for Celtic. But for Celtic to have any chance in these two ties, number one, they're going to have all their team, all their players fit. They're going to have the full strength squad to stand a chance. For Celtic, I do slightly worry going forward because they lost Kyogo, who was a massive player for Celtic. Now he's gone. They kind of do lack a striker. They've got Adam Ida, but they don't really have anyone else really up there. So that is quite a worry for them. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough game. If Celtic were to pull this off and get to the last 16, it's going to be right up there with one of their best ever performances in European football. But it's going to be hard. But yeah, that's the confirmed playoff. So Celtic will be playing Bayern Munich over two legs, and to try and secure a place into the last 16. And then just finally, before we move on, we have to touch on Rangers, who in the Europa League managed to automatically qualify to the last 16 as they finished in the top 8. So what was your thoughts on that, Pearse?
I think Rangers fans have been pretty critical of Philippe Clement domestically, But I think in Europe he's handled himself admirably, and thinking into the top 8 is a credit to them because I think they've been very strong. They were very unlucky against Manchester United. They get a terrific result against Tottenham at home. Well, they arguably could have won the game. And like you say, they've got some good results away from home as well. So I think Rangers have done themselves justice. I think getting to the top 8 is a fantastic achievement, considering that this Rangers team is probably, according to some fans, one of the worst teams they've seen. And the manager's not got a clue. But I think as the weeks progress, Rangers are getting stronger and stronger. And I think getting to the top 8, and especially for the coefficient for Scotland as well, have 2 sides in Europe after Christmas is brilliant achievement. And obviously Celtic in the top 6, top 24, and then Rangers top 8 automatically into the last 16. I think that's a fantastic achievement. And depending on the draw, who they get and potential opponents, I think Rangers would fancy chances to go quite far. And I think Rangers in the Europa League are always a different animal. Champions League, it's a different level. It's a step up in quality. But in terms of Europa League, they were in the Europa League final not too long ago. So I'm not saying they're going to go to the final, but I'm saying they've got a chance to go quite far in Europe. And I think Rangers, we've touched on the season, the style of play. I think sometimes the style of play is actually suited to Europe. Sit in, not the counter press in terms of winning the ball back and breaking quickly, and allowing teams that possession, the low block, and then just they can cause teams problems. And I think so I think Rangers, especially with Ibrox behind them as well, they didn't have that at the start of the season. So all these factors, I think Rangers have done a brilliant job getting the top 8, and I think they can go quite far in the competition.
Yeah, I agree. Massive achievement not massive achievement it's achievement for them. But I'm not that surprised, to be fair, because I don't know what it is with them in this competition, Europa League. They just seem to always churn out their best performances in the Europa League. It's just this competition that suits them so well. And that was quite a tough. They had a lot of tough games in this competition. The likes of the 2 Premier League teams, Tottenham and Man United, they drew with Tottenham at Ibrox. In my opinion, I thought they deserved to win that. And they went to Old Trafford. They lost 2-1. And with a very weakened squad, I actually thought they gave a really good account of themselves. They got back in the game the last minute, and then they conceded a daft goal on their end. They played the likes of Olympiacos. They drew away from home, which is really impressive. They went to Nice, who are in France, away from home. They won that game 4-1. So just a really impressive campaign from them. I'm not really surprised, to be fair. Nowadays, with Rangers in Europa League, they always seem to they just love that competition. I think the Rangers fans' frustrations is the fact that they just don't do this in the league, because in the league they just haven't they don't show that level of determination. You could say, they just seem to be more up for games in Europa League than they are in the league, which is their frustration. But they have turned the corner, I would say, Rangers, the last couple of months under Philippe Clement. I think they're kind of slowly getting there now. But it was worth mentioning. What an achievement for them. That's them now in the last 16. And let's see how they can get on. Because let's be fair, they'll not win the league this season. I think they're too far behind now. So if they could manage to bring all their focus really to that Europa League, they could do something really special. So just wanted to touch on that. And now for the final part of the show, Pearse will now give his Asian football roundup.
Yeah, so there's been some transfer news. Obviously, leagues haven't started back up yet, but probably one of the more wilder stories in the last week has seen Mario Balotelli, who just got released from obviously Genoa. He's been rumoured to interest two clubs in the K-League 1, and that is FC Seoul and Ulsan HDFC. So I think obviously the French website Foot Mercado broke the news, later picked up by some Italian websites. There's currently no confirmation of this news, but his arrival would obviously be very disruptive, obviously, in every sense for the whole Korean world, because I think obviously he's a massive superstar. In the past, I think obviously we all know his level. He scored goals wherever he's went, but obviously it's his off-the-field problems that have always kind of caused him issues. But I think someone like Mario Balotelli to be linked to the Korean League, I think, would be a massive draw for anyone. Just look at the impact that Jesse Lingard's had in terms of fans and viewership. It caused a crazy stuff. So I think Balotelli's a level up in terms of what he's done in the game. Obviously, Premier League winner with Man City in the past. So no, that was breaking news, and obviously one of South Korea's young midfielders won the K-League 1 Young Player of the Year in 2023, and that is Gwangju FC midfielder Jung Ho-yun, who is transferred to Minnesota United, where he will link up with Jung Sang-bin, who is also another young South Korean forward who went there from Wolves only a couple of seasons ago. So he's signed a contract until 2027, with the club having an option to extend it to 2028. Yeah, so it's a 3-year contract, and he's signed for an undisclosed fee, and that's it. Gwangju FC losing probably their best player, but another young Korean talent going and trying their luck out in the MLS. So that is all your latest Asian football news.
Thank you, Pearse, and thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Football Chuggu Podcast. This podcast will be available to listen to on the Football Chuggu YouTube channel and also the Football Chuggu website. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.